In this slideshow, I will be discussing the different contemporary issues in different sports. I will be talking about violence in sport, for example, how it has progressed through recent years, as well as how it has been developed from mob football to a more professional, more organised sport. I will also be discussing politics, drugs and gender equality throughout this presentation. You could say that violence has evolved in football from when it was first discovered in 1869. Football has started from mob football, which was a brutal sport that included 100 players from one village and 100 from another. They would all form in a huddle and the ball would be placed in the middle. However, these rules are only obeyed if the officials don't allow players to get away with vicious behaviour. Violence occurs in players for many different reasons. Most of the time, players act with aggression because the officials allow them to get away with it. I feel like a way to stop the violence in football would be to be stricter with the punishments they get for acting aggressively. They shouldn't just get a yellow card all season for repeated abuse. They should get an unpaid ban from playing until they play fairly and within the rules. Also, a lot of violence occurs when alcohol has been consumed by fans, which also doesn't help the violence that occurs with the opposing teams. A lot of pitch evasions, punch-ups and verbal abuse is due to the alcohol, as well as rival teams that have started generations ago. The violence wouldn't occur if supporters would have a limit on what they brought in as well as buy at the bar. All the bust-ups and pitch evasions ruin the ethnicity of the game, as well as stopping parents wanting to take their children due to all the abuse shouted at the players, officials and opposing teams. This shouldn't be tolerated, and if it starts to disturb or ruin the game for someone else, and they do it on multiple occasions, they should have a game ban. Politics has a variety of different impacts to different sports, including the events in the Olympics. There's been an issue with equality through the Games over decades. Athletes use politics to broadcast their opinion on the recent situations. In the 1956 Melbourne Olympics, there were a total of 3 separate protests. Several different countries protested about the Israel invasion. These countries include Egypt, Iraq and Lebanon. They felt that they need to make a public statement about the invasion. Also, other countries such as Spain, Switzerland and the Netherlands in the same year felt the need to boycott the Olympics because the Soviet Union invaded Hungary. Most political statements in sport are to do with race or invasions, or they feel shouldn't have occurred. The reason they do this in such a public way is because that is the only way the government is going to listen if the country hosting the Olympics loses money for countries not competing. These acts of political statements didn't result in violence. On the other hand, in the 1972 Munich Olympics, it was meant to represent peace. However, that isn't what occurred. 11 Israeli athletes were taken hostage by 8 Palestinian terrorists to try and persuade the police to release 200 prisoners from Israel. Unfortunately, the 11 athletes were murdered along with an officer and 5 of the terrorists. After these awful events, you would think that the Olympics would allow some people to grieve. However, they only gave the athletes 34 hours suspension. Then they carried on as normal. This sign of politics affects a lot more than a couple of people. Nowadays, the athletes have a lot more security. However, it doesn't stop terrorists trying to make a point at such broadcasted events. I feel like the politics that are involved in sport now are a lot more peaceful, and that is because people have come to realise violence doesn't achieve anything. The Olympics also allows athletes that feel victimised due to their country, race or religion. For example, an incident happened in 1968 to 2 medal-winning athletes, 2 African Americans, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, made a political statement to the world about racial discrimination. Their silent protest included them wearing black gloves and no shoes to symbolise African American poverty. The black glove was to show strength and unity. They also wore a scarf and beads to represent the lynching victims and what their families had to go through. After this statement, Professor Edwards set up an Olympic project for human rights, OPHR. He then appealed all black American athletes to boycott the Olympics to demonstrate that the civil rights in the US has not gone far enough in helping the people that are pushed aside. Drugs have been seen through loads of different sports. However, there has been a lot of activity with drugs in cycling. Drugs are mainly influenced on athletes by the people that train them, so for example their coach. One cyclist decided to tell his story about how his coach tried to make him take drugs to become the best athlete that he could ever be. Toby Atkins got given drugs only a week after joining a professional cycling team. He turned down the drugs and reported them. These drug shoots were banned from the competition. Lance Armstrong is one of the most well-known cyclists for good, however also bad reasons. He won 7 Tour de France competitions in a row and never tested positive for any drugs. However, in 1999 he tested positive for EPO. From all of the drugs being used in cycling, France has made drugs illegal and other countries have followed. Rules have also been put in place to try and stop drugs from being used. For example, winners get their titles taken away from them, as well as getting banned from the competition. This is a good thing, because it would stop people from using drugs to win competitions. Gender equality has always been an issue in football, because people see it still as a sport for boys. However, women are now starting to be accepted into playing. On the other hand, men and women still don't get paid equally. For example, the women's England captain, Steph Houghton, gets paid $64,000 a year, but Messi gets $1 million a week, which isn't fair because they are doing the same job. However, the pay is all down to how the matches are televised, as well as how they are advertised. Gender equality is also an issue with officials and commentators, because a couple of years ago, Sian Maisie was being a second referee and called a player offside. The commentators decided that she was wrong and that she shouldn't be a referee because she needs to learn the offside rule. They were fired for their sexist actions. However, women have set up a lingerie league, which makes people question whether or not it will help women with equality in sport, because they are trying to get people's attention by wearing little to no clothes.